The Louisville Cardinals are taking home the Governor's Cup for the first time since 2017 after beating the Kentucky Wildcats 41-14 in Lexington this past Saturday.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. For the first time since 2017, the Louisville football program is taking home the Governor's Cup. The Cardinals defeated the Kentucky Wildcats 41-14 on Saturday in Lexington. It was a dominant performance, incredible performance on the ground by true freshman Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. The defense stepped up big time, did what they needed to do, and overall it was a great afternoon for Jeff Brohm's program. Like I said, Louisville winning this game 41-14. We'll break it down in its entirety, discussing the significance of the win, the rushing performance, Isaac Brown making history, the defense stepping up, and much more. But the main storyline here is that Louisville was finally able to get over the hump. If you would have asked Louisville fans the day after they beat Kentucky in 2017, when Lamar Jackson led the team in Lexington, and the team didn't even punt the ball, it was a blowout victory, that Louisville wasn't going to win another game in this rivalry for, almost or over half of a decade, I think a lot of Louisville fans will be like, okay, whatever you say, buddy. But that was the reality. Everything went from really good to very, very bad pretty quickly in the span of just a calendar year. 2018 was one of the worst, if not the worst year in program history. And then 2019 to 2022, you were able to get back on course a little bit, but you had a coaching staff that seemingly treated this game as if it were just any other game, and it wasn't really a rivalry game. And maybe that wasn't necessarily all that true, but it seemed that way from a fan's perspective. And 2023, Jeff Brohm, comes into the picture. You know that the rivalry game is going to be treated as such, and that season, Louisville does anything they can to lose the game. Kentucky pulls off the upset against a top 10 Louisville team. So 2024, it was a year that the Cardinals needed to get back on track. And thankfully, they got over the hump and got this victory, because I will argue that, both of these coaches needed it for different reasons, respectfully. I mean, obviously, Mark Stoops, at this point, we think he comes back next year, but he's coaching for his job. And losing 41-14 to your rival at home, it doesn't, it doesn't bring much encouragement or excitement up. Sorry for if I sound congested. I am. Like I said, November and December just completely go to war with my sinuses, and been a little bit tough trying to get my voice back this weekend, but we're working through it. So apologies there. But overall, I felt like Jeff Brohm needed this victory. Louisville needed this victory because, bringing the prodigal son home, one of the reasons you bring Jeff Brohm home is to beat Kentucky. And that is one of the main goals each and every season. We talked about expectations on a yearly basis for the Louisville Cardinals last week, and one of those expectations is to win this rivalry game. And he did that, and he did it in blowout fashion. And it honestly, after the game, for me, it was just a big sigh of relief, finally. Because this is the first time since, like I said, 2017, but we haven't talked about, the past couple of years when Louisville has played this game. Like I said, this is my third year hosting the show. I started in August of 2021. So this is my fourth Governor's Cup that I've talked about on the show. 2021 was not good. 2022 was a respectable performance, but you still lost. 2023, you got upset. So it feels like I've seen it all. You've seen a blowout, you've seen a close loss, you've seen an upset, but I've been waiting for Louisville to win this game, and thankfully they did so. They came out right away out of the gate looking like they were the better team and showing it. That's another thing, is that this game is as much mental as it is physical. You have to keep your emotions in check, and I feel like Louisville did that. They understood the task at hand, and they operated to a really good level. Now, what I've seen from Kentucky fans on social media, ones that I know, have said, well, this is a bad Kentucky team, and you should have beat this team, and so on and so forth. You know, just basically saying that, hey, it's really not all that impressive is what, the whole is what the narrative is. It feels a lot like Louisville fans in 2018 to a lesser extent, because Kentucky in 2018 was, witnessing one of their best seasons in program history. And for Louisville, it was the complete opposite. So you were 2-9 going into that game in 2018. And the narrative from Louisville fans was that, yeah, you should beat this team. And I don't think that any Louisville fans, I mean, there might have been some, but the majority were saying, yeah, Kentucky's going to win this game by a good amount. That wasn't the case in 2024, because I've heard, as the host of this show, I've heard every single season, especially this one, that no matter what you do, you're going to have some success in the season, and then when you get to that last game, Kentucky's going to win it. Go back to the YouTube comments. You can find the YouTube comments. You can find those that said, well, Louisville's still going to lose to Kentucky. So don't let that narrative be what was said pregame, because a lot of people, Kentucky fans, still picked Kentucky to win this game. So picking Kentucky to win the game and then after the game saying, well, you obviously should have beat us. I mean, it feels very contradictory. But again, I'm not here to demonize Kentucky fans. I mean, it is what it is. I know that they're going through a really tough stretch, but I mean, you can't play both sides of the table here. I mean, you can't say that, oh yeah, we're definitely going to win this game. I mean, you saw like almost everyone for KSR predicted Kentucky to win this game. Almost all of the Kentucky fans in the mentions here basically said that Kentucky's going to win the football game. And it didn't end up happening that way. And now the narrative has shifted to, wow, you finally beat us. But it took Kentucky's worst year in the Stoops winning era to get it done. And it is what it is. If you want to switch the narrative, I really don't care. I just honestly wanted to win this game. It's relieving to me. But this is a series that has been pretty obviously one of streaks. Like Louisville or Kentucky was, or let me go back to this. Louisville was really good in the early 2000s. Kentucky then ended up winning a couple, and then Louisville ended up seizing the momentum again from 2011 to 2017. They lost the one in 2016, but still a dominant run. And then Kentucky's been dominant from 2018 to 2023. So it's a rivalry of series, like a rivalry of streaks, if you will. Probably better streaks rather than series when it comes to describing this, but you get what I'm saying. So in 2018, Louisville fans, when Kentucky beat Louisville in 2018, I know that some Louisville fans were saying, well, yeah, you beat us in our worst year. Congratulations. Things will go back to normal soon. So I understand why Kentucky fans in 2024 are saying the same exact thing. I do. I get it. But what history will show you is that one team doesn't dominate all the time. Now, the streak might seem like all the time, but it's the truth. But everything switches up. So for Kentucky fans to act like that they dominated this series in the 2000s, I think would be, falling victim to recency bias. But still, it is what it is. I'm not here to demonize Kentucky fans. I'm just here to point out some of the flaws in the narratives that I've seen as trying to take away some of the significance from this win. The truth of the matter is, winning this game, regardless of records, it matters. And for Louisville, this was a much needed win. Like, the Cardinals needed to win this game. They were the better team. It was obvious all season long. Kentucky hadn't scored 20 points against a Power 4 team all season. You needed to be really good defensively, and you needed to, put points up on the board. And I was, kind of wondering what that was going to look like offensively. Like, was Louisville going to be able to, play well against a Kentucky defense with a good amount of talent on it, with a pretty disruptive, defensive line? Or were they going to be able to run the football against a defensive front that had been susceptible and vulnerable to giving up some big time numbers on the ground? Well, it ended up being the latter, thankfully. Isaac Brown and Duke Watson were spectacular against the Kentucky defense. Isaac Brown made history for the Louisville Cardinals. We'll break it down when we come back on today's episode of Locked On Louisville. Cardinal fans, Louisville was a 4-point favorite in the game against Kentucky on Saturday, and America's #1 sportsbook was seemingly on to something. If you're new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Look, I was worried coming into the game about the Louisville rushing attack because, yes, Kentucky's defense had given up some big-time rushing numbers in the previous weeks. But you look at who they played, and you look at the offensive lines they went up against. Tennessee with Dylan Sampson, really good offensive line, really good running back. Good day on the ground for Tennessee. And then Texas with their running back room and a great offensive line. I thought to myself, well, I mean, those are SEC offensive lines, two teams that are better than Louisville. Of course, Kentucky's defensive line was going to get gashed a little bit, and there wasn't, a healthy Deion Walker or J.J. Weaver on the team, or on the field, I should say. So both of those guys back, and I wanted to see how Louisville was going to be able to set the tone on the ground, and they did it really, really well. Like, shout out to the Louisville offensive line. It's a group that we criticized early on in the year. They only allowed 15 sacks all year. This offensive line and offensive line coach Richard Owens, I don't feel like are really getting the credit that they should be. Like, we haven't talked enough about how good the offensive line has been, because they got a lot of criticism early on. Right tackle was going to be an issue. After the SMU game, everyone was like, oh, come on, what's going on here? The offensive line was really, really good, against some really good defenses. Clemson, Miami, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, so on and so forth. They also opened up a ton of gaps and set the tone in the trenches for the rushing attack. Louisville ran the ball 51 times for 358 yards against Kentucky on Saturday and had 4 rushing touchdowns. Chris Bell had 1 carry for -4 yards. Travis Egan had a carry for 2 yards. Tyler Shuck for 4 for 11. Pierce Clarkson 3 for 14. Kewan Brown and Maurice Turner both have 5 carries for just under 30 yards. But the 2 stars of the day have been the 2 stars on the offense rushing the ball all season long. Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, the true freshmen. We had an episode last week that literally was stating that Louisville has to do whatever they can to make sure that Brown and Watson are Louisville Cardinals next season. And this game was exhibit like number 400 on why that has to be the case. Isaac Brown was absolutely phenomenal. 26 carries, 178 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 6.8 yards per carry. The main news is that he becomes the first true freshman to rush for over 1,000 yards in a single season for the Louisville Cardinals. He breaks Lamar Jackson's single season freshman record who he had 960 yards. Isaac Brown has 1,074 yards after the regular season and 11 touchdowns. The 5'9" freshman has been one of the best freshmen in the country, one of the best running backs in the ACC. It has been such a joy to watch him play this season, and he's been really impressive, not only from a north to south speed standpoint, but the vision has been there. His patience when hitting the hole has been there and hitting the gap. But also being a receiver out of the backfield has been something that Isaac Brown, I feel like, is just going to get better and better at. So what he was able to do in the second half when Kentucky was knocking on the door to try to, stay in the game, Isaac Brown, a big time, almost 70-yard touchdown run to seemingly put the game on ice. And he had been fantastic throughout. But Duke Watson, also a player that needs to get credit. We talk a lot about Isaac Brown, and for good reason. Isaac Brown has been fantastic, but Duke Watson has been really impressive as well. And I thought he was a prime redshirt candidate early on in the season, and maybe he would have stayed that way had Maurice Turner been healthy. But Maurice Turner missed a good portion of the year. Don Chaney spent some of the year hurt. Duke Watson had 6 carries for 104 yards in this game and 2 touchdowns, averaged 17.3 yards per carry. He was absolutely fantastic, especially in the first half for Louisville. You look at what he was able to do. Duke Watson had the 58-yard touchdown run in the second quarter. He had a 25-yard run at the end of the third quarter. So, I mean, to be able to do that on 6 carries kind of reminds me of Mo Turner during his freshman year, but I think that Duke Watson has the higher ceiling. Was a little bit worried about how he was going to block and pass pro, but both of these freshman running back have shown the ability to be serviceable in that regard. So, I mean, it's really hard to look at this performance and not be super encouraged for the future, but you have to make sure you bring Duke and Isaac back next season, because if you do, you will have the best running back duo in the ACC, and it wouldn't be far-fetched to say potentially in the country as well. The Louisville passing attack wasn't really all that spectacular. Tyler Shuck was 9 of 18 for 128 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Like, it was a pretty clear effort to put the ball on the ground and run the football, which what should have been. I mean, Louisville was doing whatever they wanted on the ground, but Tyler Shuck missed a couple of throws. Chris Bell had 3 catches for 84 yards, had a big catch there. The first game where Ja'Cory Brooks didn't log a catch. He had a couple of punt returns, but I think he was battling injury in this game, if I'm not mistaken. Chris Hughes had a catch for 15 yards. Isaac Brown, 3 for 12. Amari Huggins-Bruce did drop a touchdown in this game, but Louisville's passing attack seemingly was probably the most lackluster it had been all season, but it was because the Louisville really didn't need to throw the ball all that much, because I think everyone was sitting there thinking, okay, Louisville needs to keep this ball on the ground, because from the very beginning, the Cardinals were getting whatever they wanted to running the football. But one thing that also kind of impressed me that doesn't get talked about, Louisville only had the 1 turnover. That was the Chris Bell fumble in the second quarter when Louisville was trying to extend a 20-0 lead. Thankfully, the Louisville defense bent but did not break. They ended up going into the lead, still up 20-0. So, I mean, you left some points on the board, and that was the main thing. Is I'm glad that Louisville leaving points on the board didn't come back to haunt them. And one of the reasons why it didn't come back to haunt them is because they ended up scoring 21 in the second half. Now, one of those was a defensive touchdown, but also shout out to Duke Watson and Isaac Brown for scoring in that second half. Not many penalties in this game either, which was really nice. Only 3 for 20 for the Cardinals. It felt like Louisville's offense did what they needed to do. They stayed grounded. They didn't let the emotions get the best of them. And that's sort of the main thing, is they channeled those emotions into a beneficial way for the team and helping winning. So overall, dominant rushing performance. really bodes well, I feel like, for next season with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, assuming that both of those guys will return for the Cardinals. This completes a regular season for Tyler Shuck, in which, I mean, Jeff Brohm doesn't get enough credit for just doubling down on, the ability of Shuck and being able to keep him healthy. I mean, he hadn't been healthy all throughout his career, and Jeff Brohm said, we're not going to run him as much. And look at that, 12 games where Shuck, I don't think, missed any snaps due to injury at all. Like, Shuck was kept upright, and like I said, Louisville's offensive line, key there, only allowing Shuck to get sacked 15 total times in 12 games. So Louisville's offense really good in 2024. The defense stepped up big time this game. They forced 5 turnovers, and Louisville native, Eastern High School product, Ramon Puryear, got his 3rd defensive touchdown of the season. It couldn't have come at a better time for Louisville, but Saturday afternoon was just the Cardinals coming up clutch, one time after the other. We'll break it down on the final segment of this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, yesterday on Sunday, I used GameTime to get tickets to the Falcons-Chargers game. Watched my Bolts get the victory over Atlanta, but I didn't have tickets as of Sunday morning. I wanted to see the tickets go down in price, and they did as it got closer to the game. GameTime got cheaper and cheaper, and I used GameTime to be able to get a panoramic view of the seat that I was looking at. I got to see the all-in pricing without any surprise fees when I went to checkout, and I knew that I had some of the best ticket coverage in the ticketing industry, and that's all with GameTime. And you can do that too. Louisville basketball having some key matchups. Ole Miss on Tuesday, Duke on Sunday. Kentucky's coming up if you want to make that trip to Lexington. Louisville has a bowl game coming up, and much, much more. Do yourself a favor. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Into the final segment of this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. This episode obviously airing at about 5 o'clock Eastern time tonight. Sorry for the delay in content, but there's a lot of news swirling right now. Louisville basketball had a really successful showing in the Battle for Atlantis this past week. Got some tough, brutal, devastating news about Case and Pryor missing the entirety of the season. We're going to break that down coming up here in about an hour. So if you're listening to this live or watching this live, just know that a basketball episode is on the horizon. I'm planning to do 2 episodes today because there is a lot of news, and I want to get to everything in a timely manner. And then with the transfer portal and stuff coming up, and the Ole Miss game coming up, I mean, I think that you have to just continually, just talk about more things. So we're going to have 2 episodes on this Monday. So wrapping up the first episode, the defense was spectacular against Kentucky. Now, one thing that we've seen in years past is that Kentucky's offense might not necessarily be all that good, but they use big plays to score against Louisville when they play in the Governor's Cup. That really wasn't the case on Saturday. Yeah, they had a couple of big plays, but Louisville held Kentucky to 14 points, and it concluded the regular season showing that the Wildcats did not score over 20 points against any Power 4 team this season. So it was nice to see Louisville continue that streak and not be the outlier in that. So I think that it was mainly because the Cardinals forced 5 turnovers. They ended up recovering 2 fumbles. They ended up intercepting 3 passes. I mean, you look at the first drive of the game. Kentucky started to move the ball a little bit on this. They had 1st and 10 at the 40. Jamarian Wilcox ran for 15 yards, and Tamari McDonald literally just took the football. I mean, he said, yeah, I'll take that. Thank you. And Louisville was able to, get the ball at midfield. Now, they ended up punting, but they were able to stall that drive out. Later on, Kentucky still trying to get down the field. You had Cutter Boley throwing an interception there, and another interception followed at the end of the second quarter. And then you look at the third quarter. Louisville had the fumble return for the touchdown. Ramon Puryear, his third defensive touchdown scored of the season. Like, I feel like he's having low-key one of the most clutch seasons for a Louisville defender in quite some time. Like, it was nice to see him being able to make that play. And it was a completely momentum-shifting play. It ended up putting Louisville back up by 17 points. And you really can't discount that. So Taz Nicholson got an interception. Quincy Riley with an interception. Tamari McDonald had an interception. The fumble returns, you had obviously Ramon Puryear, and you had Tamari McDonald as well. McDonald has been really key this season. The Tennessee transfer making some big-time plays. And Louisville, I felt like, just continued to make big-time plays coming off of that big victory against Pittsburgh. MJ Griffin, 6 tackles and a pass deflection. It was nice to see Stanquan Clark do well. Ramon Puryear played big time. You had a couple. I only think Louisville had 2 sacks. Like, they didn't get many sacks on Cutter Boley or Gavin Wimsatt, but they just forced both of them to make some bad decisions throwing the football. Kentucky was obviously trying to just run the football and get some yardage there, but they averaged 4.7 yards a carry. Jamarian Wilcox, 12 for 66. Gavin Wimsatt did have 2 touchdowns, both to Jamori Macklin. One was just a broken coverage down the field. It was like an 83-yard touchdown catch, 3 for 121. But that touchdown was one of the only big plays that the Wildcats offense had all game. Like, Louisville kept Kentucky in check. They kept them behind the sticks and having to convert a lot of third and longs. Cutter Boley got his start as a true freshman, 6 of 15, 48 yards, no touchdowns to 2 interceptions. They brought the pressure. Like I said, the sacks might not necessarily have been there, but they brought the pressure, and coverage was really good. Gavin Wimsatt, 4 of 9 for 125 and 2 touchdowns and an interception. Wasn't really all that great. We do hope that Cutter Boley isn't seriously injured. I know he left that game with an injury. Hopefully it's nothing serious and that he's able to recover quickly and fully. But Louisville's defense did what they needed to do. They kept Kentucky out of the end zone. They played with the lead really well. You saw, Louisville stay aggressive even when they had a 20-point lead. You could go into prevent defense and just do what you can to, try to run the clock out, so to speak. But at the same time, you just did a good job staying engaged and staying focused and staying aggressive. And you credit Ron English for that. Credit Jeff Brohm for that. But overall, Louisville winning the Governor's Cup for the first time since 2017. They end the season 8-4. We will await their bowl destination coming up here in about a week. Throughout this week, we're going to talk about the transfer portal, which is going to be a key for the Louisville Cardinals this offseason. And much, much more. There's a lot of moving parts. It's going to be a busy next couple of weeks, which is the way we like it here at the Locked On Louisville podcast. But thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right back here very soon when we discuss the basketball episode. But everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here coming up shortly.